There's a decent chance you've had a drink recently. Beer, wine, whatever it was, and probably didn't think twice about it afterward. But what you did in that moment is one of the oldest behaviors a human being can perform. It predates writing. It predates farming. It actually predates humans as a species entirely. Our relationship with alcohol doesn't begin a few thousand years ago with the invention of wine or the first brewery. It begins roughly 10 million years ago, on a forest floor somewhere in Africa, with a small primate picking up a piece of fruit that had been sitting on the ground a little too long. In 2014, UC Berkeley biologist Robert Dudley published a book called The Drunken Monkey, laying out a remarkably simple but compelling argument. When fruit drops from a tree and sits on the forest floor, its natural sugars begin breaking down. Wild yeast moves in, fermentation kicks off, and the fruit starts producing small amounts of ethanol as a byproduct. When primates ate that overripe, fermenting fruit, the ethanol inside gave them a mild, pleasant buzz. They had no idea why it felt good. They simply knew it did, so they kept returning for more. Over millions of years, this wasn't just casual tolerance. Our ancestors actively evolved a heightened sensitivity to detecting ethanol in food, essentially developing a built-in radar for it. By the time actual humans arrived on the scene, the underlying taste for alcohol was already wired in, long before anyone figured out how to produce it deliberately. So when did humans figure out how to make it on purpose? In 2018, archaeologists excavating Raqefet Cave near Haifa, Israel, uncovered something remarkable. The site had been used roughly 13,000 years ago by a group called the Natufians. Inside, they found stone mortars carved directly into the bedrock, and residue analysis revealed traces of wheat and barley that had been deliberately soaked, allowed to germinate, and left to ferment. That's beer brewed inside a cave 13,000 years ago. What makes this discovery genuinely significant is timing. The Natufians weren't farmers. Agriculture didn't exist yet. They were still nomadic foragers, collecting wild grain by hand and hunting for meat. They hadn't cultivated this barley at all. They'd simply found it. Yet somehow brewing it into a fermented drink was important enough to figure out before farming itself was invented. The conventional narrative had always assumed humans settled down, developed agriculture, built permanent villages, and only later stumbled into fermentation. Raqefet Cave suggests the sequence may have run in the opposite direction entirely. Roughly 1,000 years after that, something even more striking appeared in southeastern Turkey at a site called Göbekli Tepe. Massive carved stone pillars, some weighing over 10 tons, were arranged in deliberate circles and decorated with detailed animal imagery. This was a complex, intentional construction project. And it was built before farming, before pottery, before anyone in the region had a fixed permanent home. The people responsible were still full-time hunter-gatherers. For years, archaeologists struggled to explain why a nomadic population would organize the enormous coordinated labor required to move and carve 10-ton stones. What motivation was strong enough to justify that effort? The answer arrived when researchers discovered large stone vats at the site. Chemical testing of the residue inside revealed traces of fermented grain, and not in small casual quantities. This was brewing on a scale clearly meant for large communal gatherings. The leading theory now is that Göbekli Tepe wasn't a settlement at all. It was a ceremonial gathering site where people traveled from across the surrounding region specifically to come together, feast, and drink. This raises a question archaeologists have debated for decades. Why did humans actually start farming in the first place? Patrick McGovern, widely regarded as the leading expert on ancient alcohol, has spent decades building a case that humans may not have developed agriculture primarily to make bread. They may have done it to make beer. His reasoning is straightforward. Bread requires grinding grain, kneading dough, and careful baking, a genuinely complex multi-step process. Beer, by comparison, is far simpler. Soak grain in water, leave it alone, and fermentation largely takes care of itself. The motivation to drink, McGovern argues, was likely a stronger driving force than the motivation to eat grain prepared in a slightly different form. If this theory holds, alcohol wasn't something that emerged after humans settled into permanent communities. It may have been a primary reason they settled down to begin with. By around 7000 BCE, the evidence becomes far more precise. At a Neolithic village called Jiahu in central China, Archaeologists recovered pottery jars containing residue from a fermented beverage combining rice, honey, grapes, and hawthorn berries. Chemical analysis confirmed both the specific ingredients and the fermentation process used. This represents the oldest confirmed alcohol recipe discovered anywhere in the world, and it wasn't crude or accidental. It was a deliberate blend, multiple carefully selected ingredients combined with clear intent. Whoever produced this drink understood precisely what they were doing. By the time ancient Egypt emerged, beer had become woven into nearly every aspect of daily life. Workers who built the pyramids were compensated with beer, roughly 4 to 5 liters daily as their actual wage, not coins, not grain. This made practical sense beyond simple preference. Water drawn from the Nile was frequently contaminated and unsafe to drink directly, while beer, due to the brewing process itself, was considerably cleaner and safer. It kept laborers alive in a way raw river water often couldn't. The brewing process also added meaningful calories and nutrients, meaning beer functioned as more than a beverage for someone hauling limestone blocks under desert heat. It effectively doubled as a meal. Religious significance ran just as deep. Egyptians believed beer had been created by the god Osiris and given to humanity as a divine gift. It appeared regularly in temple offerings, burial rituals, and medical practice, with physicians mixing herbs into beer and prescribing it for ailments ranging from digestive issues to infections. A single drink was simultaneously functioning as a paycheck, a water filter, a meal, a medicine, and a religious offering. So here's the complete timeline. Roughly 10 million years ago, ancestral primates were drawn to fermenting fruit because it helped them locate food. About 13,000 years ago, humans were deliberately brewing inside caves, before agriculture even existed. Around 12,000 years ago, they may have constructed some of humanity's first monumental architecture, specifically to gather and drink together. By 9,000 years ago, they had documented intentional recipes. And by 5,000 years ago, entire civilizations were functionally running on it. Alcohol didn't arrive after humans built civilization. There's a genuine possibility it's one of the reasons civilization got built in the first place. Every time you have a drink today, you're continuing an impulse that predates your species having a name for itself. The ingredients changed, the process got refined, the cups got considerably fancier, but the underlying pull traces directly back to a small primate reaching for an overripe piece of fruit on a forest floor 10 million years ago. We simply learned, eventually, how to make it happen on purpose. If this changed how you think about your next drink, let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more research-backed deep dives into the hidden history behind everyday habits. And next week, we're looking at the one ancient beverage that may have shaped an entire civilization's religion around it.